It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Kraig Bowers. Purdue gets an 80-45 win over Marshall, a game that was put out of reach pretty quickly and really wasn't much of a game in the second half. Still definitely some stuff to discuss, obviously starting with the new starting lineup. But, Kraig, Purdue gets an 80-45 win before getting to a very, very tough part of their schedule. What are your initial thoughts of the game?
It was just nice to have a get-right game, and when we previewed this game, there were a few things that we pointed out we thought we would see, and one of those was the fact that Marshall is one of the worst fouling teams in the country, and we saw that today. This game had a lot of flow, like right out of the gate with all the pace and space that small ball lineup had, and there was a lot of cutting, a lot of easy shots at the rim early on, and guys knocking down threes. And then about 10 minutes in the first half, I thought this game just kind of crawled the rest of the way until it finally ended. Purdue takes 33 free throw attempts, 16 margin there in terms of plus 16 in free throw attempts. One of the first times we've seen that this year, really, since Zach's been gone. So it was nice to see them force the issue some, get those fouls drawn, get to the free throw line, and capitalize.
Yeah, I'm with you. And for me, just the overall thought was like, when we did the preview show, right, and we were saying, what do we want to see? Like, I wanted to be, I just wanted to be kind of bored in the second half. I wanted Purdue just to dominate, to put this away, and that's what they did. 35-point win. It didn't always feel dominance. I think the end of the first half, kind of just the way that it flowed, and Purdue not making a field goal for 9 minutes put a little bit of a damper on it. But win by 35 against a team you should beat by 25 plus. You take that going into, now it is the Thanksgiving tournament where you have back-to-back tough games. And then from there, a couple very tough non-conference games. So it was good for Purdue just to kind of have this get-right game, be able to tinker with some stuff and figure some stuff out. And we probably should just get straight into it, right? As Purdue throws out the new starting lineup. And this is the small ball lineup that offseason, at various points, especially for me, it was what I thought would be the starting lineup this whole year. And that is Smith, Lawyer, Colvin, Heidi at the 4, and TKR at the 5. I guess first question is, were you surprised to see it at all? Or not see it at all, but to see it start today?
I was surprised, honestly, and just more than anything, I got to go to media days yesterday, so there was quite a bit of questioning along the lines about that small ball group and just how it was looking, and things that needed to improve with that. And I get the main reason I was surprised is I didn't come away from that day in those interviews feeling like there was any indication as to that's where they were headed. So I thought, based upon some things Painter said, that there was going to be a lineup change, but I honestly thought it was going to be first. I think the thing that I mentioned this to you, during the game, that I was most surprised about was not that they started the small ball lineup, but that they were committed to it regardless of whether TKR was in the game. In terms of, the other 4 on the floor, there were stretches where First was at the 5 and Cam was still out there at the 4. I'm not positive. I'd have to look at your rotation sheet, whether there was a stretch where Burgess was with the 5 and those 4 were still on the court, or some variation of 4 small out was on the court. But they seem to completely buy into it for the first time, not just use it as a segment. And then when they did have 2 bigs on the court, for me, it was really like, we've got to give Cam a rest. And then that's when we saw First and TKR, First and Burgess, TKR, Burgess, whatever the 2 big lineup was.
Yeah, so I was surprised they went to it. I do think, I don't think it's far and away the best lineup, and numbers-wise, it hasn't been at all so far, but it is how you get your 5 best players on the floor. Colvin and Heidi have started to really come around. They both have pretty big, at least opening starts. They both end up with 13 points. We'll talk about them more later, but yeah, it was interesting to see them go to it. I do like First being kind of the first one off the bench if we pull up the rotation sheet, and that's where I feel like it should go. It feels like it should be to me right now a mix of TKR at the 5 and First at the 5. And those feel like you're probably your best two lineups. Burgess maybe can slide in eventually. Berg will have his moments, I still think, where he has his random games where you do need him at the 5 for that big physical body. But it was good to see that you saw, like, offensively, that opening stretch, like Marshall couldn't do a thing. Purdue was crisp. Purdue was moving the ball. Brain Smith was finding everybody that they needed. And then it just kind of slowed down from there. I think there's still concerns defensively, still concerns rebounding the ball. And I know the numbers by the end, I think Purdue technically gets more rebounds by the end of the game, but they were out rebounded in this game. And that's still concerning against a Marshall team that, like, they just, that shouldn't happen. Yeah. Marshall has the better offensive and defensive rebounding percentage slightly. So, and that's even with garbage time kind of,
yeah, but
again too.
Purdue had gone up positive before they started the major shift in terms of like taking.
They went up when Martin fouled out with like 12 minutes left.
Yep.
They're center.
Okay. Yep.
It's still it's going to be a concern for me. Like, and honestly, it's not even just a TKR at the 5 concern. It's Purdue basketball concern, which is wild to say that. Like, I am concerned with how this team rebounds the basketball.
And I think there's been a lot of focus on the need for the wings and the guards to crash the boards. But I think more importantly than that is they've got to get a body on somebody. There was just way too many times today where you'd see a guy from Marshall, and we've seen it in other games too, come flying in from 10 feet out. And it's like, who's got a body on that guy? It doesn't matter where you're at on the court, if you're close to a rebounding position or not. Jakari, Fletcher, Miles, whoever it is, Braden, they've got to put a body on their guy just to contain a little bit and let the other guards and wings that are closer be able to collect that rebound, in my mind.
Yep. No, and I'm with you. And right, you even mentioned on press row, like, Colvin's rebounded the ball really well lately. Heidi has 2, and they absolutely have. The numbers aren't great, 2 and 3 rebounds today, but the rebounds were kind of spread out between Purdue. But yeah, it is. Even if you're not getting the specific rebounds, like, you still do have to hit somebody, like you said. And yes, your individual rebounding numbers maybe vary, especially when Brain's able to kind of crash and grab and go, or TKR is going to have his games where he just has 12 rebounds, but consistent effort, and even that on the defensive end. So we'll get back to the defense because we're 8 minutes in. I don't want to just completely talk about the negatives and a 35-point win. Let's start with that 5-6 minute stretch for Purdue offensively. Really, I guess even the first 10 minutes where Purdue just felt like they were whipping the ball around and knocking down a bunch of shots. What stood out to you, I guess, within that first kind of 10-minute stretch?
I mean, the pace, and not up and down the court pace, but within the half-court offense, just how fast that ball was moving, how quick decisions were being made. It got Marshall out of position, and we were able to get open looks, whether that was for Cam, whether that was for Miles. We saw, obviously the big alley-oop for Miles early in a set, but the pace and space for me was just great in that first stretch. And then at the same time, I think I leaned over to you, and I don't know if I'm using proper terminology all the way through or not here, but I felt like I saw more like 45 cuts from our wings in that first 5-minute stretch than I'd seen all year. Guys dive into the rim, and TKR is able to locate and find him. Braden's able to whip it around and find him. And in that, it all kind of went away, like, after that first initial stretch. And I was interested to get on the postgame show because I wanted to ask you, did Marshall change and do something different, or was it just Purdue just kind of just melted back to their little bit more slowed down pace that they're used to?
It was a little bit of a mix because I watched most of Purdue's offensive possessions for the last 10 minutes during halftime again, and it felt like there was a couple things going on. One, it felt like they were starting to try to get TKR really going in the post more, move away from some pick and roll. It also just took Purdue forever to get into their sets, and just like, not that Purdue's a run and gun team, but just even the movement within the set, it wasn't as crisp. They weren't, I don't think, rolling as effectively. Brain wasn't coming off screens as effectively. And then the other thing, I do think Marshall, right? They started similar to what Marquette did. They put 2 on the ball against Braden every single time.
Yeah.
And like, I know there's a lot of concerns after the Marquette game of like, oh, that's how you beat Purdue. You put 2 on the ball and all that. Like, you have to have really good backside defense. And if not, this is what's going to happen in that first 10 minutes of Braden's going to whip around and find whoever he wants to, whether it be TKR on the short roll, whether it be Heidi and Colvin in the weak side corner. You are playing 4-on-3, and Braden is going to pick that apart. He threw like a between the leg bounce pass to TKR on the short roll. But then in that last 10 minutes, I thought Marshall got a little bit away from that. They played a little bit more drop coverage, and it felt like it was it was like it was drop coverage. And so what I mean by that is like the big defending whoever is setting the screen for Purdue is going to generally drop back. What Edie has played all of his college career, but it was very high up. And so it was almost between like a hedge and a drop. And it felt like Braden was just waiting for like the defense to rotate, but it never really had to because Marshall was able to stay in front. And so then when you combine that with some pacing issues, that with also Purdue just going away from it a bit, that's where just the clunkiness I felt like came in for that last 10-minute stretch. And then also like 5,000 fouls doesn't help either. Just the flow.
Right. Yeah, no, that completely disrupted the flow 100% as well. But it's going to be interesting to me because we've seen it. They've certainly played it the last 2 games down the stretch more. But within some of those stretches, I felt like, all right, we've got this small ball lineup out there, but we're still going to feed TKR in the post. And to me, when it's really effective is when they're doing more of the pick and roll and catch him in the short roll and everything else, and just having constant movement and instead of getting stagnant and just throwing it down to him and everybody staying around and watch him, take 3 or 4 dribbles and see what he's got. So I think it's going to be interesting as they figure out that balance and mix of like, when do we want to be playing with a lot of pace and a lot of cutting in that half court set, and when do we just want to feed TKR? And there's going to be spots, obviously, right, where if TKR can eat, let him eat,
Yeah.
But
and that's what they did in the second half to start.
Yep. Yeah, because they went to him those first 5 possessions. 4 out of those 5s were true post ups. The other one was a short roll, and he scores on all 4 of the post ups, has a turnover on the short roll. So, and when in the preview show, that's what you and I thought we were going to see, because we thought it was a matchup where TKR could just go to town and eat, and he was going to be able to draw a lot of fouls because they foul a ton. And certainly that's how the second half opened.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, I think, decision, even with TKR at the 5, especially as we get into Big Ten play, as we start playing Auburn and Ole Miss and all, these types of schools. There is an element of like TKR at the 5 takes away part of his ability to just overpower bigs down low. And it is going to be interesting to see how they balance that, because I think even to start the second half, Nate Martin for Marshall, I thought he did a solid job of not letting TKR really create space. So then it's you have to almost give TKR the ball at like 15 feet and let him face up and work from there. Not a bad thing, but and then I agree with you. It's just like you obviously have TKR is so good in the post, you have to feature him in the post. And if you're going to get single coverage, like you take that matchup all day. But is there going to be times where it comes at a cost of like, okay, now everybody's just kind of standing around. Yes, you have your off-ball cuts and Purdue does a good job still. But does it disrupt the rest of the flow offensively? Is it worth it? It's going to be an interesting, I think, interesting and good thing to watch, because, right, it's not that TKR post-ups are bad by any means. I would say they're one of the more efficient plays in really in college basketball, but especially for Purdue, it's just something you can go to. It's going to be I don't know. I'm kind of just, it's where I'm at with this team. It's just like, I don't quite know. Like, you see the upside and like, oh man, this team can just blitz teams offensively, and they force a lot of turnovers today. We'll talk about that more defensively, but they still give up a lot defensively, and they don't rebound well, but also they win by 35. And so I'm just like, I don't know.
Right. And it wasn't a crazy offensive output type of game. I mean, Purdue finished with 80 points. And I don't remember what they were on pace for when, he started kind of subbing in the deeper down the bench guys, but it's not like Purdue put up 100 to win by 35, right? It was what you would expect Purdue to be around in real games against Power 5 teams, at least 80 or more. I think the team is capable of having a even higher offensive output against some of those good teams is still. So I'm with you though. I like sometimes there's a clear advantage, but if it gets everybody else out of the rhythm of the game, is it going to cost you long term, right? When they need those other guys scoring. So I don't know. I thought that first 5 minutes was really fun though. And I've been one who's kind of been like, hey, let's maybe pump the brakes on pushing for that lineup constantly, because like you said, that the data hasn't really necessarily proven that that's the most efficient lineup yet. But in that first 5 minutes, I was like, okay, like if this is what it is, let's go. Like, let's go.
Yeah, and I think that's like that has to be Purdue's identity this year. I think at this point, there was hope that maybe one of the bigs could really come through. I think First still showed stuff, and I think he's emerged right now as the big. But this team just has to outscore teams, like just straight up, just be a better offensive team, and be like, hey, try to keep up with us, and that just feels like the best way for them to win. And that probably does come with a lot of TQR at the 5 and just the spacing that it provides and all of that. So
if you're going to look at the statistics of both teams at the end of this game, and just the final score, would you look at that and say those stats kind of lie about anything in this game?
The defense, just because
okay.
I 0.714 points per possession for Marshall. That is really, really good defensively. I'll start with the positive. They forced 19 turnovers. Some of them, yes, Marshall just being, making bad passes, whatever. There was definitely more of an emphasis, it felt like, on pressuring the perimeter, forcing deflections, and things like that. But it really stood out today that, like, this is a team, and I think, honestly, especially with TK at the 5, you do have to go with it, this is a team that's not going to be able to stay in front of guys well. So you live in rotation, and you just have to get deflections. I don't think people want it. I don't think Painter wants it, but I think that's just where this team is. And so this defense at times able to fly around, also gave up a lot of open shots. And I'm waiting kind of for the full stats to come in. They might be in by now. And to see what they kind of gave up compared to open and not. It was about 50-50. So it was a little bit better than I expected. But even that, I think, skewed a little bit by garbage time. It just felt like what stood out to me today is it felt like Purdue's defense has to be perfect. And what I mean by that is you have to have the correct rotations always. You have to be able to read what's going to happen and start being able to be like, okay, this pass is probably going here. I need to then be here. Because when that doesn't happen, then that's when Purdue allows the ball to move and then open threes. And that's just what stood out. Now, Marshall missed a lot. This was still a solid Purdue defensive performance, but I don't think it was a 45 points defensive performance, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I was kind of walking you into that because I thought Marshall got a lot of open looks in the first half, especially. I thought we were actually better in the first 10 minutes of the second half.
I agree.
Defensively, especially on the perimeter, but it looks great when you look at the stats and when you look at the final score. But I also thought there was just a lot of open looks that Marshall missed. Obviously, like you said, maybe this is just going to have to be who they are in the small ball, that they're going to try to, get in passing lanes, harass the ball handlers a little bit more, create a few more turnovers. But at the same time, they may give up a little bit more at the rim or open looks from outside if they get off in rotation a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to adapt as the year goes on. They did only allow 14 points in the paint today. That is I don't know how much of that is it's Marshall and it's not Cam Jones or not Phylon, who are both incredible athletes that are probably going to be first-round draft picks. But nonetheless, that's a much improved stat from the last two games.
Yeah, and it's going to be something to monitor, right? I don't think there's huge takeaways other than just like, hey, this defense is going to have to work hard. There is upside to it, especially if they can force turnovers. But the points in the paint will be something to go monitor going forward, especially what they play I don't know actually how NC State is really doing this year yet, to be honest. They're 5-0. They beat five bad teams. So we'll have a preview out on NC State and then also just the tournament as well that they are in next week during Thanksgiving. 20 minutes in. Throw up the rotation chart. We'll just see if anything kind of stands out. So for anybody that is watching on YouTube, one, please like and subscribe. Helps us out. Come join in the chat if you want. Colored box means that's what that player played for that minute, what position corresponded at the bottom, plus minus. I think we kind of hit on, obviously, the big thing with TKR at the 5. It also felt noticeable that First was the first one off the bench as the backup big. And obviously, if this game doesn't go into garbage time, First probably plays a lot more than 10 minutes, I would guess, maybe closer to 15. That's the only thing that really, I think, stands out to me besides what we've already talked about. Jakari, I think, had a good game, so he gets more of that second half run. It feels like whoever's hot between Jakari and CJ and whoever's playing better just gets those minutes. Is there anything that stands out to you besides those? I know it's harder in like a bye game like this.
Yeah, I actually, just looking at this now, I thought there were more minutes that Cam was still on the floor at the 4 with a different 5, but I guess there was only 2 minutes in the end. I guess it just surprised me because that first sub when Caleb came in, they still had, essentially that small ball lineup out there just with Caleb instead of TKR. But I guess that's the only time it happened throughout the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, but like it gets tough where that second half, then they do go to First at the 5, and then after like a couple minutes, this game's a 35-point game, and
right.
you aren't rotating back in. Yeah, I think it gives Painter a little bit of flexibility. We talked about it with Casey before, and it's just like, oh yeah, with First coming off the bench and TKR starting at the 5, you can go either way. If you want to size up, throw him at the 5. If you want to keep playing a little bit smaller, you can throw him in for TKR, keep Heidi at the 4. So let's get into some of the kind of player stats, then we'll keep this one relatively short. TKR leads the way with 18 points, only 3 rebounds, 2 of them offensive, 7 of 12 from the field. Colvin and Heidi each have 13. Heidi a perfect 3 of 3 from the 3 and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. 3 rebounds. Colvin 13 points, 2 rebounds. Fletch only 3 shot attempts, 6 points. Marshall put a lot of emphasis on him not being able to get the ball. Brainsmith, no points, 9 assists, 1 turnover in 26 minutes of play. Where do you want to go? Well, I don't think we need to go crazy in depth on all these players. We can even just do it by position group if you want, but where do you kind of want to go with this?
I just real quick, maybe let's talk about Fletcher and Braden and then move on to some guys. If you told me before the season that between Fletcher and Braden, they would have 6 points combined and Purdue would still win by 35 against anybody, I'd have slapped you. Like that's just wild to me with this group. But Braden did what Braden does, and that's he played for the team the way he needed to play for them to get the best outcome. And in this game, that was facilitating. So he had 9 assists with, I think he subbed out around 10 minutes left in the second half, if I remember right. He had 9 assists already there. He only averaged 7.5 assists a game last year. He came into the day averaging 9.4, had 9 with 10 minutes left in the game and went out. I just going to say, can you, I need big face, Joe. Yeah, for all the Braden Smith haters that said the only reason he could get huge assist numbers was because he was tossing the ball up to a giant in the lane that could catch anything, anywhere. Newsflash, he's averaging 2 assists more basically a game per game this season to start. So that wasn't it. And it's going to be a rough season if that's what you were hoping and you were praying on Braden Smith's downfall from a point guard position.
Braden Smith's good at basketball. It's I think it's pretty obvious at this point. And this is a game, this is one of those games. He had him last year too. Not that he doesn't care and not that he doesn't play hard, but it's definitely just like I'm just going to kind of do what I want and we're going to win and it's not going to be a big deal. We've seen Braden can be aggressive when he needs to. The 4 shot attempts doesn't concern me. Even the 4 for Fletch, I think, especially early on, Marshall, when they were putting 2 on the ball and Braden, they liked helping off Colvin and Heidi a lot more. They did not want Fletch getting going. And so there are going to be those games. It is important, though, that with it that Colvin and Heidi knock down shots. And so we can kind of transition there with them. Of they get in the starting lineup, both put up 13 points, both knock down threes. That's kind of the calling card, and maybe crash the glass a little bit. I think it gives you a little bit more versatility defensively on the perimeter, but they have to knock down shots. They are going to be the ones getting looks. Heidi and Colvin is your fourth and fifth option offensively. Like that's going to be a good offense.
Yeah, no doubt. And we've heard Painter say in interviews many times over the years that starting or coming off the bench affects different players in different ways. And I have no idea what's going on in the head of Miles or Cam coming into this season, not starting, coming off the bench. They still gave plenty of effort doing that, but it just looked like there was a confidence boost for both of those guys today. Cam was like, as soon as he caught that ball, if there was space, he was going ahead and shooting right away. Early in the season, when he was coming off the bench, we saw him hesitate. You and I were both like imploring in some of these posts, like, just shoot the ball, Cam. Like you're a dead eye shooter from out there, shoot the ball. And Miles was more aggressive. Now we've seen Miles, in my mind, just kind of slowly, incrementally become a little bit more comfortable with attacking off the bounce. And now he's not ISOing a guy and taking him off the bounce. He's doing it in the way Fletch does, right? Where he's coming around the screen and he's got some leverage and he's able to get downhill. But we just hadn't even seen that really last year or in the first few games this season. And I think he had at least 3 drives where he tried to get into the paint, get to the rim. Obviously attacked with that big alley-oop dunk, went coast to coast, thought he was going to have an awesome Euro into a dunk, and it looked like he changed his mind partway up and tried to switch to a layup and then just missed it, just fumbled the ball. But I like that. I like seeing that confidence, that aggression. I don't know that Miles needs to be trying to take people off the bounce 10 times a game, but if he can do it just when the advantage is there, when the leverage is created, and he has that driving lane, he needs to commit and do it.
Agreed. And I think it's still a work in progress. I think it's still a little clunky, but just the pure ability to get downhill with his athleticism, he doesn't need to generally create a ton of space just because he can jump over dudes. But I agree. Like, he's got to get to, if he can get close to like a Fletch level of just that, like, hey, maybe this isn't the prettiest thing, but it kind of works and it keeps defenses a little bit more honest. If he can get to that level, that's all he needs. Obviously, we know he's a knockdown shooter. He has the athleticism to finish at the rim once he can get there. It's just that in-between part of, can he get there to actually be able to do it? That's going to be the big thing.
Yeah.
Anything else on Colvin? It's switched to Heidi.
Oh, go to Heidi.
I don't have too much on him. Obviously knocks down 3 threes. He looked confident. And I think the big thing that I want to say is, like, we just can't overreact always to like 1 or 2 games. I think we were concerned, and I think that was fair, but it wouldn't have been fair to just write him off and be like, hey, yeah, he's not good anymore after only 2 games. And now he's turned it around. He looks confident again. He's found his role again, right? I think those first 2 games, especially, it felt like he's like, hey, what am I actually doing out here? Like, what am I supposed to be?
Right.
I'm the 4, but I'm still only played the 3. I'm trying to figure this out. And now he's started to. He's going to be another one that, like, at times he's going to at some point going to have to attack closeouts and be willing to kind of shoot at the rim. He did have 4 free throws today. I don't remember specifically where they came from, to be 100% honest. So he could have drove and got fouled, and I'm not remembering, and I'll admit that one.
One was a drive. He just kind of, I'm not sure if he was trying to dunk or layup. It really looked like he knew he was going to get contact, and he just drove and jumped into contact and got the foul on a shot attempt. And then I think the other one was on a rebound, actually.
Okay. I'm bringing that up because looking at his stats for the season, he has 16 free throw attempts, which is fantastic. He has 13 3-point attempts. He is 8 for 13, by the way, 61.5%, and he is 0 for 1 from 2.
Yeah, I mean, those 2-point shots are all going to be at the rim. So
yeah, and he's gotten fouled a lot. That's helps.
Yeah, I was going to say that's distorted a little bit because there's been some 2-point attempts that have gotten him to the line. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he's going to be still primarily a 3-point shooter unless there's a straight line drive to the rim. But he's got the athleticism to leap out of the gym, and he can create contact in doing so with that athleticism and get to the line. And as long as he's hitting his free throws, that's great. And
Yep.
As a team, I thought they were way, way better today. But I think a lot of that comes from, obviously, TKR went there 7 times, but a lot of that comes from our good shooters were drawing contact and getting to the line.
First one 6 for 6 quietly from the line too, which helps.
Which we've got to talk about Caleb soon. But we need to talk about TKR. Like the dude scored 18 on 7 of 12 shooting, 4 of 7 from the free throw line. Still needs to improve a little bit there, but like we should probably talk about the leading scorer.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting the Zach Edey treatments of like, oh yeah, he played. For anybody that watched our shows last year, the running bit was we just never talked about Edey till the end because it was like, okay, cool, he had 35 and 17 rebounds, like cool. But no, TKR 18 points, 3 rebounds, 7 of 12 from the field. It felt like a very much a TKR game. I think I would have liked to see him crash the glass a bit more, but that can be said for every Purdue player. He gets some of the short roll work where he's getting to the floaters, he's getting to post ups, he's getting to the rim. Purdue had 19 shots at the rim and only got 48 field goal attempts. Like this was one of the games where they got downhill a lot more. You saw that second half stretch where they could just go to him in the post, and I think I don't know. It feels like he went 2 for 4. I don't know that for sure. That's just what my gut tells me on the second half.
No, there were 5 straight possessions. I already went over this. There were 5 straight possessions. He scored on 4 or 5 of them. The other one was
he scored on 4 of them.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh wow.
He scored on the first 3 off true post ups, 3 in a row. Then Braden hit him in a short roll, and pass was a little bit off, and he fumbled it off his leg. Turnover, and then came right back down. They went to true post up again, and he scored a 4th time.
Well, there you go. And like we hit on the TKR stuff at the 5, so I don't have too much more to add, and I'll throw it to you in a sec. But it's just TKR is also really good. TKR is a all Big Ten level, and that's what they need out of him. They need him to be a guy that they can go to in the post at various points. They need him to be a guy that can just spam pick and roll with Braden Smith and continually short roll and make shots from there. So I don't have too much more to add. Like he has become the player that I think many were hoping for already.
Yeah, and I think if anybody was questioning that, and quite frankly, people were, and whether they were Big Ten people or whether they were, more national people out there, they were questioning whether TKR could really become a dude that could be an all Big Ten caliber player. And everybody who's been around the program locally or former players who've come in and sat in on practices and stuff have been saying like the dude's going to be all Big Ten sometime. Like it's going to happen. Doesn't mean that it was a guarantee it was going to happen. He still has to go out there and do it. But I think it's safe to say at this point, he's probably going to finish the year as the leading scorer. Really good chance he's going to end up on one of those all Big Ten teams. There's a couple things here. One, I think we only saw it a few times tonight, but I love that kind of empty side set where they just turn it into a 2-man pick and roll game.
Yep.
And I feel like every time they do it, it works. And sometimes I'm just like, do it more, man. Like, that NBA thing of like NBA coaches, when they find something that works, like they just don't go away from it until teams change. And sometimes I just want to see it more. I'm curious.
Go ahead. To jump in before you change points, I'm curious if this was a close game, if they go to it more.
Yeah.
If Fair enough. More of just like, hey, let's get other guys involved. But it's something in a close game, and there is something like that. Like it should be gone to a lot more.
Yeah, because I think TKR is so good in that set in general. And then it gives him so much space to operate, and with his ability to drop step and make spin moves and everything else, I love it. I love it. I love it. The other thing, TKR has been the biggest proponent of this small ball lineup. If you've listened to any of our recordings or stuff from Golden Black or from Casey Bartley of the practice interviews and that type of stuff, he's been openly campaigning for this lineup the last couple of weeks. And you could tell he wanted it to work so bad because there was one time I think it was Cam, didn't go where he was supposed to go, didn't make the right cut, and he was animated. And
it was Burgess.
There was one with Cam too. There was definitely there was a couple. But the one I'm talking about with Cam, like there's a dead ball right after that play, and Braden has to like gather TKR at half court. And Braden's usually the one that kind of gets too fired up sometimes, and other people got to calm him down. So it was funny to me to watch Braden out there like, hey man, chill. Like, slow down a little bit here. But he wants to play with that pace and space lineup. Like he wants it bad. And you could tell he was fired up and really pushing for everybody to perform at a high level today. And it's important that him and Braden and Fletch all step up in that way.
Yeah,
from
and
a leadership standpoint.
And I think it was visible today. It felt like TKR was frustrated, truthfully, out there. You could just see it. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you listen to any of the Painter interviews and stuff, he's like, hey, this team doesn't like talk on the court. He's like, great people off the court, all that, like no locker room issues, but like they don't talk on the court. And you saw TKR. I saw TKR today multiple times. You mentioned the Heidi thing. I remember the Burgess. I'm looking at where that happened on the court. He expected Burgess to cut off the post. He didn't. It's a turnover. There's another time. I think he wanted Jakari to force. This was on defense. He wanted Jakari to force the ball sideline. He doesn't, and it worked out fine. But you see TKR just be like what's going? Like, what are we doing? And it's, from the sounds of it, like Purdue needs that guy, and you generally want that to come from your best players. Braden and TKR are probably the most. I would say Braden, TKR, and Fletcher are the most vocal. Some of it probably just comes from pure experience. TKR, this is his 4th year in the program, which people probably, I think it's forgotten about a bit, right? He redshirts, and this is his 3rd season. He's also played with Zach Edey. Like, he has gone through everything, just like Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer have. And I think at various points you see that all 3 of them do it in their own way. And that was just something, yeah. Once you started talking about that, I was like, oh yeah, it stood out to me that like TKR was letting people know if they messed up, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Were you at the exhibition game TKR's freshman year that he did end up redshirting?
Probably, yeah, I would assume so.
Okay, because it's just like, it's just a little bit amusing to me, because I remember being at that exhibition game. I think it was with Braggs, and just turning in that moment when there was a lot of talk about, is TKR going to redshirt? Isn't he going to redshirt? And he was the guy that wasn't in the right place multiple times. And I remember turning to Braggs or whoever it was and be like, yeah, he's going to redshirt. Like it's just not going to come together this year. But I only say that to say he's been there and he's worked through it to now where, he's a leader on the court. He knows exactly. TKR is an extremely, extremely intelligent dude. He knows what's supposed to happen all the time. So now he's got to be the one that brings those guys along and do it in a constructive way. And it's okay to be animated on the court. That happens. It's what players are going to do. And it's good to see him taking and kind of jumping into that role.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. You mentioned Caleb first. We can talk about him. 8 points, a rebound, 2 turnovers, but he's plus 20 in 11 minutes. You said that we have to talk about him. What did you see from first?
I just thought he moved really good, and I thought he finished more confidently today. And I am really to the point now where I think the more game action Caleb gets, the freer it's going to come to him. And the less, sometimes you see like the wheels spinning in his head when he gets the ball of like, okay, what am I going to do right in this moment right now? Do I go now? Do I shot fake? Whatever. And I think just the more game flow he gets, the better and better he's going to get. And man, he's so damn good in terms of his mobility and his athleticism at his size that I want to see it. I want to see him getting serious minutes, because I think come March, a developed Caleb that's back close to what he was as a freshman is going to be our best chance to go deep in March. And in terms of being, whether he's the first guy off the bench or whether in some matchups they start him next to TKR, whatever it is.
I'm with you. That was my thing off season, was like, hey, Caleb first kind of needs to emerge. And
I didn't believe you, and that's my fault, but I believe you now, Joe.
I went away from it for a little bit at the starts. So like I can't even take like full credit, but why I was big on him the off season was like, you watch some of the minutes and it's just like, it's there. But like you said, it just, wheels were spinning. I like that. I like that. It felt like the wheels were spinning. I also I think his minutes needed a lot of context last year of like, he had, in my opinion, one of the hardest jobs in the entire country of backing up Zach Edey. Like that is a tough thing to do with how refs play. You are in such a different dynamic. And I agree. Now as he's starting to get more and more minutes, it feels like I don't know if like you said, I don't know if he needs to start every game. Maybe there is some games or he plays starter minutes some games. It doesn't have to be an every game thing, but like he feels for right now the guy that can give you the best balance of movements, some rim protections, and then offensive stuff too. I mean, he's 9 of 15, obviously very, very small sample size. He's 14 of 19 from the free throw line. He's getting to the foul line a lot, and making shots there too. So that's a big thing too. I'm just hoping to see more. Like there was always just something. I was just like, it feels like he just gives the best balance. Burgess, I think, can eventually bloom. If I don't know if it's this year, I don't know if it's next year. But they need first now.
I think the only thing we really need to say about Burgess, first of all, that dude is just a massive human being. Like his body, there was a couple of times it didn't look pretty, but he was like surrounded by 3 people, and it just looked like I don't know, like a vulture, like holding up food above everybody else and banging around bodies. But the only thing I really want to say about Burgess, and then we don't really need to say much more, is I just felt like he looked a little more comfortable knowing what was going on out there. Now, he starts that cut and he cuts it off, and TKR wanted him to keep going so he could hit him with that pass. But just in general throughout this game, I felt like his feel and understanding of both the offense and the defense is just starting baby steps to look a little bit smoother.
And that's all you want from Burgess right now. I don't think it's realistic to put the pressure on him of like, oh, he has to be a 10-minute game guy for this team. If he can get there by the end of the year, fantastic. And there is that chance.
Oh, and he did hit the prettiest free throw of the game. And our man Joe just got kicked out of the StreamYard. But if you were able to watch the game on Big Ten Plus, then you got to see Raleigh bank in that free throw, and the entire bench was just dying laughing, and Raleigh looked over and was laughing with them. It was a good, light, fun moment in that game. But Raleigh's actually a good shooter. You saw him attempt 2 threes today. Has enough rotation on that ball and soft enough touch. The one kind of hits the front of the rim and still spins in. He's going to be a good shooter before his career's done.
He's confident. He's a confident shooter already, and that's big. Like that is big for a freshman that could be, in theory, a stretch 5 at some point. I think the only other guy I really want to talk about is Jakari. 6 points, 4 assists, 2 rebounds, 1 turnover in 25 minutes. I thought the defense was solid. I don't think really anybody stood out too much defensively. It's just going to be a defense by committee for Purdue. But the offense was just like, he got downhill. He was the most comfortable, aside from Braden, probably, of like getting downhill off the perimeter today. And we were talking on presser. I'll let you say what your point was in a sec, but I won't take it from you. But yeah, it just felt like he was able to get downhill, find open guys. He was aggressive, knocked down 2 layups. I think both were layups. Misses his 3 in the shootings. I would like to see the shooting improve, because I think even if he's not an elite shooter, I think he's better than what his percentage is showing right now, which is 3 of 14. But it just felt like if this was a close game, there was a chance he gets more closing time minutes. I don't know if he takes them from Colvin, especially with how Colvin had shot the ball, but it definitely made sense to me that he got the minutes over CJ today, especially CJ struggling a bit scoring the ball. But just overall, I was like, oh yeah, this looks like a good Jakari game.
Yeah, and there were 2 plays in that Marquette game where he got downhill also and ended up making a really nice pass to find somebody that was open for a good look. And I think he did it at least 3 or 4 times today. And multiple times, his vision is so good, because multiple times, once in that Marquette game and at least 2 of the drives today, I was like, he's got nowhere to go. Like he doesn't have anybody. I don't know what he's thinking right now. And then last minute, he sees somebody out of the corner of his eye and fires a pass that's accurate. It's going to be really important. And many people who talk about Purdue this year have talked about it. It's going to be really important that there's somebody secondarily who can create shots, not necessarily for themselves, but for everybody else, that they can get into the paint. They can get the rotations out of whack for the opposing defense and find people. And I think Jakari's just, again, with all these freshmen, it's, well, other than CJ just like blew up and then had 2 rough games. But with all these freshmen, for the most part, it's going to be baby steps. But if he can get to the point where he's confident getting downhill, and he's confident playing through contact physically to draw a foul and attempt a layup. So as long as he can do that, and so they fear him going to the rim from that standpoint, it's going to allow him to find other guys that are open, and we've got shooters everywhere besides him. So,
yep, no, I'm 100% with you there. I don't know if I have anything else really for this game. Do you
only
have
other
anything?
thing I was gonna say is keep shooting, CJ. Like,
yep,
I've watched enough in practice in the scrimmages, and everybody saw it in that little moment. There's times where I don't think CJ's ever going to miss when I'm watching him shoot. Last 2 games have been rough for him from a shooting standpoint, but Purdue is going to need his shot making. So just keep shooting, young man. Shoot your way through it.
Yep. No, I'm with you. I'm going to
go ahead.
Because Tariq Kamel said, glad you're on the first train. It was a no-brainer to me for this season from the beginning. Have to get him back ASAP. Just look at his plus minus, and his confidence isn't even back yet. And I was curious. I was like, what is his plus minus? And 5 games. Well, the stats that I have don't include today. I guess I could add it in. But he's only been a +8 in the 5 games before, which is one of the worst on Purdue's, and that surprised me. But he did also he had minuses in the 2 bye games where. That's where plus minus just gets wonky of like you have to add context and like all that stuff. I just wanted to throw that out there. I agree. First has to be, if not the starter, he has to be one of the first off the bench for right now. And that's just where Purdue stands. Take care of the 5. That lineup in theory should only get better as they start understanding what they need to do defensively together, what they need to do offensively. We know that's going to be elite. So a good win for Purdue, 80-45. Good to see that they were able to just take care of business, have one of those just dominant start to finish bye games. And now we get out of here. They play Thanksgiving Thursday against NC State. I think it's a 3 Eastern tip out in San Diego. Kraig will be there live covering. So get some warmth for him for Thanksgiving, which will be fun. We will have a preview out over the tournament, Rady Children's tournament, sometime next week. And then we'll obviously be live shortly after the NC State game. We'll be live working on Thanksgiving because I want to watch Purdue hoops and then I want to talk about it. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Kraig, you have anything else?
No, only thing, excuse me, Jesus, frog jumped in there. Yeah, when we're out in San Diego, I will probably be covering the pressers, so it'll probably be somebody else on with Joe, whether that's Greg or somebody else that hops in. We got a couple people that volunteered to hop in, so we'll still have the show rolling. I'll have some video up of the post-game interviews after both of those games as well.
So, yeah, look forward to all the content that we'll have out during a very, very fun, very busy week of college basketball, which is Feast Week. So, appreciate everybody tuning in, and on the way out, please like and subscribe, turn on bell notifications. You'll get notified as soon as we go live. So appreciate everybody. Purdue gets the big time win, and we will catch you all next week for the NC State preview.